the rhythm, catching every beat. Together we embrace the futures at our feet. The futures at our feet.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. This is not just any episode of the podcast. It is episode 300. That is 300. We are 300 episodes deep. It's pretty significant, that, and we're super pleased. It's just me and Steve today, but because we thought we'd take a big thing around this in terms of we want to celebrate this. We want to talk about some of the things that we're passionate about, some of the trends that have come out in our in our booklet this year. But we just wanted to take a moment before we do get into that to thank all those people that have subscribed and listened and shared and got involved and are part of the pack. But 300, Steve, it's big news, that, mate.
No, it potentially is about 600 based on all of the episodes that exist that probably haven't been numbered. But this is officially 300, And you look back and it's amazing that 300 can either sound significant, can sound massive, but also for some people might sound insignificant. But actually you put that into context of how many years we've been going, the EdTech project that it started as and the iterations. We've also got vaults and the book ones that we did and all the other offshoots, but actually 300 shows consistency, the dedication, I suppose, over a long period of time over the years to put information and conversations out for 52 weeks of the year. I know in the early days we used to have summers and half terms off for educators, but we moved away. So it shows a significant contribution in terms of our effort, that it wasn't ever a flash in the pan, that we wanted to put stuff out as a consistent message, and 300 in, mate, and something to be proud of, I guess, isn't it? You know, a pat on the back for ourselves.
Agreed, and it's class. We said, and Steve, it's actually Steve that said this. He said that it's our own CPD. It's our weekly CPD where we get to interview people. Yes, we have to put that together and get that out into the world, but it's our CPD. We absolutely love the fact that each week we get to interview incredible people from all around the world, some from our country, some from other countries, some on it in education, some related to education. And we do a review and on a semi-regular basis of each series or each group of episodes. But I think we're just getting started. I know that's a little bit cliched, but we're just getting started with some of these. And if we were to think about some of the examples of wonderful podcast guests we've had, like one of our most popular episodes historically was the brilliant one with Paul Dix. I don't know if you remember that one, Steve, where he was talking about transforming behaviour. And Paul Dix obviously has got a big reputation, but episode way back in 2021, that one was Edufuturists 123. Episode 123 was with Paul Dix. It was like just great, helping us rethink behaviour and what that looks like, and that behaviour has become a theme in what we've talked about. That actually, it's not about punishment, it's not about compliance, it's not about exclusion and all the things that go with it. It's about how do we ensure that behaviour is communication, and how do we learn from that and develop that. So yeah, some really cool things in that always gets exciting when we talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember just on the politics thing, he wrote the book, obviously, When Adults Change, Behaviour Change, and then obviously spin-offs of that, but based on, I got to work as a chair of governors in Wellspring, and he'd worked with a guy called Dave Whittaker on positive regard, and it's all of that research based on in Scotland in terms of banning the booths and all that kind of thing. And under the previous government, what did that look like? Like it was literally constantly really against the tide based on their approach of we don't do it this way, we do it this way, all about quiet corridors or silent corridors and quiet classrooms and all about absorbing learning and all that kind of thing. And I wouldn't say that we've completely moved away from it under the new government. There is still the revolution that needs to take place, but ultimately it demonstrates that against all of one version of fact of what works, actually there's some real demonstrable evidence-based stuff as well that shows that it doesn't have to be that way, and things can be different, and behaviour isn't just a all children act naughty and children act naughty. It's a response to behaviours and trauma and all those kind of things. And I remember we did add on, I can't remember what episode, but it was the trauma-based research stuff in Scotland. I've got a friend who now works up there on something quite similar. I just think if you look back, we're not going to go back over the 900. Absolutely not. We want to look forward into our trends and everything
900?
else.
900. Is that
9
including
years,
all the others?
300. Yeah, that is. Yeah. It's about 900, maybe 1,000, but the 300. There's so many to pick from. We've got so many favourites that we could talk all night, Ben.
Yes, we could. Yes, we could. And you know what? I tell you who would love this podcast, and I'm really surprised he's never been interested in coming on. That'd be Gary Barlow, wouldn't it? Like Gary
absolutely
Barlow.
would. You'll never forget where you're coming from, eh? I don't know. Just and all
We're
those
going to
kind
rule
of
the
things.
world at some point, aren't we? And
yeah,
you can
just holding back the flood, aren't we?
Take that.
But yeah, I think we've had people.
For
like,
those people who don't know, by the way, if you listen
Ben
back,
said that I pretended that I was Gary Barlow.
Steve said Gary Barlow. He said he thought he was more like Gary Barlow.
In terms of my old age. We're not going to open that can of worms again. It's been well and truly short, but of what I said and didn't say. But yeah, I think there's been some great ones. I think we've had some people that have been in positions of strength and power, Lord Unite and all those kind of things. But actually, we've had some great examples of collective groups from the Leo Academy of Kids on the podcast. We've had EdTech innovators. We've had people writing books. We've had so much diversity. And also, what amazes me is how we continue to find those voices that maybe people haven't heard before, those quieter voices. You know, we've been big champions of women in tech and edtech. And actually, recently we had Emma Darcy on that we've been trying to get on for absolutely ages. And you know, what a voice of strength and change Emma is. But actually, I think that maybe resonates in the event that we held, you know, our uprising to speak at that over 50% of the people that attended, we'd never come into contact with and never actually been to an event of ours before. And I think that it's that we're not just going to create an echo chamber where everybody just has a dance. It's a growing community that we're trying to build alongside the podcast and everything else we do, where you're welcome to come in. And if this is your first time, that's fine. Come in, the water's warm, and you'll be looked after. And there's lots of learning to take place. And I think that's the strength of the nine years and the 300 episodes, not 903 years. That actually it's consistent in terms of our approach, that we won't sell out, but our opportunities to extend the network beyond just what we see in front of us is a thing that we champion often.
Agreed. And, you know, I think I told you, Stephen, though, that it's not necessarily been talked about on the podcast. I had the absolute privilege a couple of weeks ago to sit next to the wonderful Mick Waters at a dinner. And I just got 4 hours of wisdom from a wonderful human being, another person that we've had on the podcast. And I think what he said to me it really resonated. And I think, I don't even know if I told you this, Steve. He just said, I'd love to come and be involved in any of your events. So somebody who has that level of prestige, he's written books with Sir Tim Brighouse. He literally left that event to get into London to speak with people, ministers from the DFE and others. He is super well respected as a professor of education. Said, I'd love to be involved in your events. Let me know when it's coming. I'll come and do whatever you need me to do, or I just want to be there and be around what you're doing. It's super cool that we're able to build this. One of the things that we talked about heavily on the podcast, and you see it in some of the branding stuff that we talk about, is the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. And 300 episodes deep, that has been proven time and time again, that we want to be rebels. We know that we need to be rebels. We need to do something different. Education has stayed the same, and it's failing learners. With all the stats, it's not necessarily saying that schools are failures or the systems are failures. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying individual teachers are failures. What we're saying is we are more than happy by design for a third of our learners not to be a success in mainstream education. We're more than happy for that. And the reason why we know that is because we've got a norm reference system. My point of that is that we need a revolution. We talk about this a lot, and we know we've got to be careful about when there's evolution and when there's revolution. We've got to think about what that means in terms of chaos and disruption. But really, really importantly, we do need change, and we want to help spearhead that. But it's not about Ben and Steve's ideas, or Ben, Steve, and Dan when he was with us, ideas about what we think happens and what matters. We're trying to build and help build a community that's a wolf pack, that is, we are stronger together, we're better together. We said that in our last episode. We said the phrase better together. Community, community, community. What do you think? Can we amplify your voice? What are you doing that people need to know about? And yeah, we've got some ideas. Yeah, we've got a few things that we have to say. But that's the reason why we want to build a community, is not just to amplify our voice, but to amplify those of others. And I think that really ties us nicely into where we wanted to take today's conversation, and that we release these trends booklets every year, and I know that many of you came to the event, have got one of these, and we'll put a link to a digital download version of this in the show notes. But our trends booklet that we put out onto into the world, this is volume number 3, and we basically say that we're thinking these are the global signals about the future of education. What we're seeing, what we're hearing, what are people telling us, what comes on the podcast, what themes come out of that. And the 4 themes that we'll address today absolutely summarize what we want our community to be about in a really positive but positive disruption and considered disruption way. So should we dive into them, Steve, and think about those trends?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose third one being something that you just kind of mentioned in terms of that considered disruption. And I think it's the whole thing of, we see so many different people talking about digital transformation and disruption and so much investment. I don't think there's enough money to invest in technology. That's absolutely fine. But actually, I think it's that whole thing of rethinking and what do we do to transform using the digital space, and what do we actually just replicate and iterate? Like, I'm not criticizing anybody that's moved. If you look at the basic SAMA model, it's a model that has existed. So, like, how much stuff is digital transformation and how much stuff is just substitution? So, is it transformation, or is it just substitution of what already existed? So, I'm a big fan of Joe. And we've had them as not inventory, but like the sign-ins of things like that. So signing app and those kind of technologies, great. But is that digital transformation, or is actually just moving into the digital space through an evolution of removing paper to move to something else? And I think it's that whole thing of, Joe, what have we actually changed in organisations, and then have we considered ultimately the disruption it would have long term on it? But at the same point, just because it would disrupt, it's still we can't not do it, just because there is some consequence potentially if we don't consider, and that's that considered element of the disruption, I guess.
Of course it is. And I think even in that example you just used there, if it is just simply replacing a paper visitor register with an electronic one, and it stops there, that's all it is. But if that is then helping with a safeguarding conversation, if that is making sure that we've got workflow automations that help, if that is making sure that we've got a single register for DBS and enhanced DBSs, these are all good things, because it's a disruption that is necessary for the well-being of students and for the betterment of an education system. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is that Matthew Weems, actually, we quoted Matthew in the trends booklet, and he said that considered disruption isn't about tearing it all down or waiting for some perfect future plan to land from above. It's about making intentional choices right now that reflect the responsibility that we carry. And when we're talking about disruption, we know that technology is the big disruptor. So yes, there are digital replacements or substitutions. I agree with you there, Steve. But actually, technology has the potential to really take learning to a whole new level. And I don't want that just to be like cheesy, of course they're going to say this, out of the box thinking, like supercharging, game changing. That we're not talking about that. But especially when it comes to things like AI, and we talked about heavily AI on the podcast since I can remember. We were talking about it early on in terms of this space, but what we are saying now is that when AI is integrated in a considered way, it can make a difference. Stephanie Holt also said this, and I know that I'm hogging it here a little bit, but she said when AI is used thoughtfully, it becomes a scaffold for independence, helping learners take ownership of their growth while providing the safety net needed to explore, fail, and succeed with confidence. And that's what I'm super keen for us to keep. We're seeing it, but to keep pushing is, yes, let have this technology, let this AI, let these things happen, but in a considered way that's contextual rather than just one size fits all copy paste model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was Tara Jones actually in regards to the ability for tech to transform learning spaces that all look exactly the same is actually it's worth the disruption. That actually, you look at any school and what we've created is a real uniform approach to the size and space of classrooms generally, and the look and feel, the furniture that goes in, all of those kind of things. And actually, disruption is not about, and technology is not about putting it in and being a particular name for a marketing tool of a reference or a showcase place and everything else. That's great. If it's a hat tip to the work that's been done by educators rather than a marketing tool. But ultimately, the ability for technology, AI, or anything to really transform learning in spaces that are outdated is actually the cheaper option and the safer option. Because what is the other alternative? That we rebuild all the schools and we reinvest there, and we take learners out of education and we homeschool them for a period. I don't know, like a football stadium where it's got to shut down, or a shop where you've got to change the whole look and feel of it, and you've got to shut that shop down for a period of time. Are we going to do that with schools? Well, I don't think we're gonna. So ultimately, the opportunity that we've got is to try and implement technology to have a real positive disruption on learning, to influence a world that they're already used to. I think I said this on the podcast with Emma, or it might even be with the children on AI, where ultimately, I just think that I've kind of lost my train of thought, but I just think we're just constantly thinking about what we've always done, and technology might be good to have, where actually it's not. Like, our young people use it day in, day out? And actually, how can we ensure that they use it productively, positively, where it enhances our learning and the human capabilities?
That's the bit, mate. That's the bit. You talked about learning. You mentioned there, and I know that lots of people are talking about ed before tech or ped before tech.
Yep.
You're talking about learning. Considered disruption, I think, starts there. It starts with learning first, and then how does technology complement, supercharge, disrupt, and make that learning stronger and better?
Rather than ped tech, what about the I, the intelligence bit, and the H and the A being completely interchangeable, but ultimately the amplification and the need for AI is because it will respond quicker. It will be able to do all of these different things. But actually, the need really in terms of our education system as a purpose is to really develop rounded, holistic human beings.
Like those humans that thrive, like Valerie talked about, Valerie Hannon.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's going back to how many years ago is it? 5 years ago since we had Valerie on? Probably even longer. I'm going to bring it up in a second when you start talking about it. But it's like looking back and you think, oh, that's such a long period of time. And ultimately, technology, when considered and disrupted, should influence, but should amplify the human intelligence and the human capabilities. It should be a way to extend it, not to do it as an add-on. And this whole thing that was misquoted in regards to artificial intelligence will make us lazy and all of that will diminish. It doesn't. But how many people, like, you go into schools, how many of those learners are actually engaging and their knowledge been developed anyway, or is it just their ability to cram and get it out in an exam? Is my
100%.
response.
100%. And I think that as kind of we put in the trends book a phrase that's really that's landed for me, and as I wrote it, I thought as we were writing it, I was thinking hopefully this really lands. It says, stop buying gadgets, start reimagining learning. And I think that's it, is that learning spaces, learning technologies, learning environments, learning activities, learning models. Let's start reimagining that, and let's let technology be a disruptive force in that to help us do the things that we want to do. The second trend, for those people who haven't yet read the article, and you're welcome to, like I said, grab a copy of that if you've got to this point and you haven't read it all. You can nip over. It'll be on our website very soon if it isn't already, but you can also get a copy of that in the show notes. The second theme was around assessing beyond grades. And one of the things that we said, and we were quite forceful about, we put it in bold, is that the current assessment model is broken beyond repair. The current assessment model is broken beyond repair. I intimated that a few moments ago when I was talking about a third of the students in GCSE in the UK will fail by design, because we have a curve model that's norm referenced. It's not criterion referenced. It just is norm referenced. And if you want to nip back into the conversation that we had with Mick Waters and David Cameron, well worth having a little look at that one. I'll put the link for that in the chat in the chat as well. But they talked about how schools are becoming accountants and accounting firms, rather than something that is a learning institution. They're just measuring numbers and rearranging them into nice little tables and Power BI dashboards. It's better. It's got to be better than that, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that consideration of all stakeholders, we're not saying completely get rid of exams, but ultimately they have become the be all and end all. And I think if we look at traditional assessment methods rather than just class and calling them exams, I think there are the stats there that are really, really key in regards to parental view. We've been interviewing quite a few opportunities and alternatives to education systems, Ben. And I think that's the thing of the growing trend there to shift to online, to homeschooling, those kind of things, because actually the groundswell is that an opinion that I think it's 62% of parents say that traditional assessment methods no longer reflect students' true abilities. And you look and you just go, okay, so that's a significant amount. Then you've got those amount of learners that are not engaged. I think is it 20% roughly of learners that repeat persistent offenders, and even a slightly is maybe
persistently absent. Yeah. Agreed.
So you've got those people there. Then you've got those people are not persistent; they just don't turn up at all. That's well beyond 1.5 million. So you look at all of those kind of things, and then you put into the mix of okay, and then you get to that assessment. And you talked about 40% and all that kind of thing. We have the statistics, based on FE week and all that kind of thing. But on top of that, beyond school, we then push learners into doing maths and English. Not just about doing and sitting maths and English, passing it in exactly the same way than actually assessing them when they've already been told that they're a failure multiple times, and then they've got to go through the system, repeat and being told they're a failure because our assessment never is just looking at a grade. Actually, should it be not around progress? So if you think about, and I'm going to put a college context on it, if you think about those people at ESOL, maybe coming to England as adults or post 16 for the first time, and they're experiencing this education system for the first time, how would they be expected to get a 5? Like, when they've been assessed and they're showing maybe an entry or a really low level. What about those adults that are struggling and they might have been on their 6th or the 7th time? Then we've been in FE for such a long period of time. We know it. It's just the absolute craziness of it. And you look at all that and you just go, okay, well, why don't we focus on progress? And rather than putting an assessment in there that measures a number, how do we demonstrate progress and context for some of this stuff? I remember contextual key skills and all these kind of stuff where it used to be embedded into curriculum. But it's just moved to, no, you will only know these facts. And under the previous government, it was a case of, no, we're now going to extend that because we see it more important. We're not saying it's not important. What we're saying is the way that you're assessing and demonstrating that how good somebody is at it really needs to be considered in a different way. There are so many different things. And I think in the trends booklet, we talk about alternative assessment methods, portfolio-based, peer, self, real-world context. And I just think, when do we ever apply really, in terms of those high-stakes exams, real-world context to that learning? We just don't. We just do it all and then say, write a letter to a friend. Or something like that. I'm like,
or pass an exam or whatever else it is, in whatever context. And I think the challenge there, and I don't want to just feel like I'm banging a drum, but we put a stat in the trends booklet around not just about the broken assessment concept, but I really want to throw on to what you're saying there, Steve, that the implications of this, because yes, it means that we've got students that are persistently absent. Yes, it means we've got students that are electively homeschooling. Yes, we've got all these students that don't feel prepared as they come out of work, of school, and parents are saying it, employees are saying it, universities are saying it. But the number is this. FE Week gave us some numbers, which is that 175,898 pupils aged 16 failed grade maths GCSE in school this year, and 181,682 failed English this year, according to what a failure is, grade 4 or less than grade 4. Now, how on earth can we say that that's okay? And it's not. The flip side to that is that most people say, well, then they need to keep doing maths and English. Or that what we're measuring is the wrong thing to measure, or what we're saying is important is the wrong. Now, do I think that students need to be able to read? Yes. Do I think that students need to be able to write? Yes. Do I think they need to have basic numeracy and functional mathematics? Absolutely. Am I grateful that I did well in those things? Yes. But do we need that yardstick measure? Does it need to mean that that must include algebra and whatever else and Shakespeare? Those things are all great. But are they necessary if it's going to then label a student a failure? That's where I think I sit with.
Yeah, I posted on social media. I saw a post on social media and it made me laugh because it was like, another day's gone where I have to be really upset that I haven't used algebra again today.
Yeah, I saw the same one.
Probably, we're in the same echo chamber, mate, I guess, in terms of the algorithm must point to both of us. But yeah, just bonkers, isn't it? You just look at it and you just go, why? Why is that even a thing? And why do we still keep on doing it? Like, if I'm honest, and this is going to make me sound really think, I don't even know where I'd even use it in context. I probably don't even know what it is. If somebody put it in front of me, but I'm just like, it's so, like, we remember when Dan was on, we used to always talk about U-shaped valleys and all that kind of thing. And I was like, I don't even know what one of those things is. I probably do, but I'm like, it's
U-shaped very different to a V-shaped valley, which is the actual thing we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, V-shaped valleys and U-shaped valleys and all that. But I'm like, I'm making me sound like an absolute moron. But I'm like, it just doesn't make any sense, because ultimately, if it does, not all information that you learn has to then be used. I get that, but there's so much noise, and I think Ben, you talked about it, that we need to create more space. We just seem that we add stuff in, we never remove anything as a consideration now, so it just gets added on and added on. No wonder teachers are overworked, because the content is so detailed, and half of it you never use ever again anyway.
Absolutely. And then I suppose it harps back to, because we don't just want to just point a finger and say we want to get rid of grades. My big thing is, and it is from Mick Waters, he talked about that criterion reference versus norm referencing. And if that we believe is a genuine solution. The other solution there is to tie into what Mike Howe said. He's not said it on the podcast, he said it to me personally, and perhaps we should get Mike on to talk about this in a little bit more detail. But he talked about that we value what we measure more than we measure what we value. And so we have a real big thing about tables and numbers and league numbers and ratings and grade numbers, percentages, when actually should we really be measuring the things that matter to us, about, like you said, about progress, like student well-being, like happiness, things that are a little bit harder to measure and it's more difficult to scale, but surely collectively as educators we can find ways to do that, as opposed to just say, well, can they do X, Y, and Z times tables? but they can't have a conversation with another human being. That's what really matters, right?
Just because it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it and spend the time to do it then. Imagine if a learner just says, I'm not doing this, it's too hard. Like, you know, like literally that doesn't stop learning. It's an opportunity to develop and tackle it in a different way. And I think the problem is we haven't really consulted and really looked at the rounder view. I think we've done a curriculum review and all these different kind of things, but ultimately we always ask the same people the same questions, in my opinion, and you're not going to get any innovation by only asking the same people, because you put into the real world and you ask the same big organisations, and there's no discredit to Morrison's and Jaguar Range Rover and Virgin or whoever they ask, all of these big tech or big companies just as general. But actually, the highest percentage of types of organisations are 1 and 2 small to medium-sized businesses. So why are you asking big business all the questions about what the real world looks like when actually the real world is not just big industry? So that is an example, but we're just asking big. We don't ask, when did Mike or Sue or anybody else who own their own business as a cleaner or anything get consulted in really what they need as a workforce if they were to bring people in and apprenticeships and all those kind of things. They just don't. They don't. So,
No, they don't. They don't. I think that's super significant. Because those people probably don't care whether you've got maths and English. They care about whether you can do some stuff.
yeah, absolutely.
So the third trend for this year that's in our booklet is agency with guardrails. Now, this has had a lot of positive traction, hasn't it, Steve? We've talked about the idea that agency with guardrails is that what we've done in education up until this point feels like guardrails, no agency. As long as we've got a box and we can control them, we can make them compliant. I put on LinkedIn the other day, I know that you're engaged with it as well, Steve, that a school that I was involved with the other day said their golden rule is to follow instructions without question. That is their number. They're like, that is how they're going to solve behavior in their school, is to follow instructions without question. And I just thought to myself, I was in a meeting with them yesterday, and I almost said, I cannot believe that is, we're in 2025. This is not, we're not in Nazi Germany. We're not in Soviet Russia. We're not in communist China. We're talking about the UK that's saying compliance, following instructions is the answer. And I'm like, says who? Whose instructions? Why are your instructions the right one? Because they're a teacher, they should get listened to. That's BS. And I've been a teacher and I want my kids to be respectful. But ultimately, we need to not teach kids to follow rules. We need to teach kids to value themselves and value what really matters, and to have some dignity in their own opinions. And they might be wrong, and they might have misinformation or malinformation, but that does not mean that we should be controlling people and telling them how to think and what to think. But then flip side to that is not saying give them the keys and let them drive without any kind of guardrails and support. And so I could rant on this, my friend, as you well know. But agency with guardrails is where we're suggesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Ella had a graduation from reception. Didn't even know that was a thing until I had a 5-year-old, but here we are in the new world. And I was mega proud, got upset as a dad because they kind of, the teachers, every time they brought one of the kids up to the stage, they said, we are proud of, and they said, for thinking outside of the box. I'm not necessarily sure I like that phraseology, but I love the fact that what it signifies is Ella is an independent thinker, is a creative, and she asks a million questions, which is tiring, but at the same point, that's what I want. Because when she gets into the world, I don't want her to just go along with the crowd. I don't want her to just be manipulated by others, positively or negatively. I want her to have friendship groups, but choice. I want her to have agency. But as a parent, we put guardrails in, exactly the same for education, that ultimately we don't want to create chaos. What we want to create is these independent thinkers, these people that can have agency, so that ultimately in the world, work, or whatever, and just in life in general, they can analyse, they can make the decisions, but they also do it based on feedback, based on choice, based on personal preferences. And I know that we say we give choices in terms of what GCSEs will do, but I just don't think it goes enough for me. I think the guardrails need to be widened a little bit in regards to ultimately allow learners and teachers being able to just take a bit of ownership and agency themselves with support and drive things forward, but with that safety net. So that if they do fall for the first few times, it's not going to be falling from a high rope to death. It's going to be into a net that's captured, and that's where teachers really thrive to then support them and rebuild and scaffold their support and go again.
We
But
wrote,
they're just not learning that.
We quoted actually somebody who said that exact same thing. So we interviewed Julia Adamson and Miles Berry from BCS when we were at BET. Another highlight, we didn't even mention that we got to be a media partner for BET last year, and that which was super exciting. But this is what Julia said. She went, giving students agency is vital, but it has to come with the right support structures. We need to create environments where students feel safe to take risks, try new things, and know that there's a safety net if they need it. Now, if you were to describe most classrooms and schools, it wouldn't be that. It wouldn't be that students feel safe to take risks or try new things and that there's something that will catch them. They're absolutely petrified to try new things. And the reason why I know that is because they asked for a spoonful of sugar. That's what they asked for. They asked for, tell me what to do. What will this be on the exam? What do I need to know? That's what happens. And the Ellas of the world, graduating at age 5, who are curious, who have got questions, who are risk-taking, are interested, do that because they felt safe. And you probably don't give yourself enough credit there, Steve, and Ella's mum as well, that they've created an environment where it's okay to ask questions. You don't want to just create compliant children. You want them to have an opportunity to ask questions. But how long will that be the case? Because I think Tom from Scorlon said something similar about whether we're at a point now where the question that Sir Ken Robinson said about our schools killing creativity has now become like a statement of fact rather than a question. Because how do we keep that fire and that spark of that Ella's got in there when actually what we're seeing at the opposite end is not kids who are risk within boundaries, that are trying new things. They are just doing what they feel they need to do to pass because they've been told they have to do this, and that's the fear mentality just pisses me right off. I don't get it. I don't understand why we would rule from a fear perspective and a control and telling people what to do perspective. It's just bollocks, isn't it?
Isn't that the whole of the education system? If you look at any risk taking in education whatsoever, risk is seen as a really negative. You can't take a risk because it's our children's future. It's a greater risk to not take, to not change, let's be honest. But if you look at teachers, how much flexibility and risk can they take? If you look at leaders, how much flexibility and autonomy are they given? And all the way up, it's not. It's about compliance and box ticking and being read by accountants and those kind of things. Just looking at Tom from Scollon's quote, and the bit that we aren't, so he talks about the 2006 stuff, talks about that it's now a factual statement, but he also says we aren't nipping it in the bud either. We are actively suppressing it at the youngest of ages before eventually the spark dies out and the learner falls in line with the factory model. How sad is that? Like, if that is the case, and we just need to move beyond it quickly, but we only do that by allowing risk-taking, but with the guardrails, like up to everybody. Like, allow that safety net to be there, but allow them to have the freedom, the autonomy, and the support to actually move into that space now, not tomorrow, not in the future. Just do it now, like, and allow
and it's
it.
not just the kids, this, is it? We say that, don't we? We're saying this because we've created a system. You just mentioned that, the system. We're talking about teachers as well. We expect teachers to be free and do amazing things and prepare students for the future, and we just micromanage the fuck out of them. That's what we do. We micromanage every last little minute, every minute of the day. Or they can't go home until and they've done all the work, but they can't go home until that time. They must do this many directed hours. They must do this, and this. Because somehow, if we control them, they'll just be compliant and do what they do. We've talked about the numbers that are leaving the workforce. In the past 10 years, 60,000 teachers quit in their first 5 years. That's one stat that's come out of there. But these micromanaged teachers, the phrase that we used in here, it's like teaching. We're expecting them to teach juggling whilst wearing handcuffs, and it's like it's just batshit that we're saying what we want to do is create these innovate new ideas. They can't do that when there's no space to do it, and nobody is saying throw the baby out with the bathwater. Nobody's saying unbridled support. We haven't just said student agency or teacher agency. We've said agency with guardrails, and we do need to create guardrails. My question here is, based on what you said as well about broadening the guardrails, it's also thinking about who determines the guardrails. Who is the person that says this is a non-negotiable, and then where do we get to the difference between negotiable and non-negotiable?
We had, and it's a quote in the book to kind of to think about in terms of agency, what it means. And we had Tara Jones on 284, and she said that giving students agency means letting them make choices about how they learn and what tools they use, but also have to help them develop into critically thinking and navigate the digital spaces safely and responsibly. That's what the guardrail is. That ultimately the world can be scary, but ultimately by just restricting it and removing it doesn't help. That actually we need to help them to make the choices, support them, but be there as those adults to support with our understanding, our expertise and experience, actually best practices and ways to navigate and examples in practice and context.
Totally agree. So it's this idea that actually we need to stop controlling every step, and we need to start building conditions where trust happens, where learners can thrive, trust educators, and then we support the journey appropriately. It's a little bit like stabilizers on a bike. If my 14-year-old still had stabilizers on a bike, then we'd have a problem. Steve might need some stabilizers on his bike because he fell off his bike the other day. He knew that were coming, didn't you? You knew that I was going to mention it. But you don't want stabilizers when you're in your 14, 15, 16. But you do need stabilizers when you first start out. So let's think about where they come and when that's appropriate. The final trend, if we're to move into that one, I know this is something that is on your heart all the time, Steve, but it's come up in our podcast after podcast. It's come up in every single conversation that we seem to have at events, speaking at the ALC conference, speaking at BET and being involved at BET, speaking at the Brilliant conference and interviewing people there, as well as all these webinars that we've been doing globally and supporting organisations. And that's the idea about redefining the purpose of education. So what is the real true north? What are we trying to achieve in education? And it obviously that's a thread in lots of things that we've talked about already in this episode. But we think, and a phrase that we used is we've become so obsessed with the mechanics of schooling that we've forgotten to ask the fundamental question of what are we actually trying to achieve? What's the point? What is the point of education? Is it to create compliant factory workers? Is it to prepare them for the world? Is it to prepare them for the world of work? What is the purpose? And asking them questions is a key driver of what we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely, and I think it's really interesting. I just had a thought there, but when we treat children exactly the same, we produce them exactly the same, we want their output to be exactly the same, and all these different terminologies we put on it. So that conformity word comes back out again. We don't focus on individual potential, but ultimately, if you look at regionally, if you look at locally, if you look at all of these different things, what does life, what does the world look like in those different cultures? What does the environment look like? What does the opportunities in terms of work, if we go on to work? All those things are very, very different, but we put a national emphasis on it and then say, well, off you go now. And they've then got to find their way in regards to those navigation. Ben, you do a very different job to most. You don't do a 9 to 5, you and all those kind of things. we don't teach entrepreneurial skills. We don't teach any of those bits, because ultimately that model of your work doesn't fit with the other percentage. But ultimately, we're only teaching to those rather than, and education is only focused on those bits and those parameters rather than the rest. And I just think it means absolutely bonkers. And I think we treat children as these empty vessels. We treat them as things that we just have to all do exactly the same, like it's a uniformed conveyor belt of a manufacturing plant. And I just think, you know, I want to see different variations of biscuits. I'm just thinking about the LinkedIn post from and everything else. I want to see different variations and different opportunities, and I want kids and schools to be unique based on area and who they are, rather than just that. And I think we do by focusing on them as humans rather than on just people who are just going to know stuff, and the mechanical element of education, I think, in terms of that metric.
And the fact is that knowing stuff doesn't set you apart, because we mentioned earlier on about artificial and human intelligence. These machines know shit. They know a lot of shit. They've got a lot of training data. So we don't we don't stand out as humans. We don't thrive. There's no point in doing education if an AI can do that. If the purpose of learning, of schooling, is to help people know stuff, then we are going to lose in that battle against robots and machines. So if that's the only measure, so the purpose, which is what we're suggesting there, is about how we develop empathy in young people. How does learning become a lifelong process? How do we do the things that Steve talks about a lot, based on Tom Sherrington's work about the rainforest and the shoots of good practice? How do we help young people nurture care and compassion? And Emma Darcy talked about this in the book, not even on the podcast, and I thought it was really good what she'd said there. She said it will be complicated with no easy answers or solutions to global challenges such as misinformation, climate change, and what it really means to be human. But that is all the more reason to get started now and make sure no one is left behind. So the purpose of education is going to be difficult. It's going to be complicated, but it is going to be something that we can't afford to ignore. And I think I really want to shout out Darren White's thought here as well, which I knew. Sorry, Steve, if you were going to go there, but he said this: trying to grow and measure every mind in exactly the same way is about as natural as a square banana. In only the way that Darren could say it, right? If many of you know Darren, wonderful, wonderful thought. We've treated education like a monoculture for too long, aiming for uniform, predictable outcomes because this makes for convenient data analysis. Power BI dashboard, yep. But trying to grow every mind in the same way is unnatural and vulnerable. A rainforest thrives on diversity. Every plant and creature plays a vital role, creating a strong, interconnected web. That's what we're trying to build, isn't it? We're trying to build a different, not all the same, not a factory, this is not factory farming. We're not trying to have compliant. We want diversity, and we want to embrace diversity.
Absolutely. I think there's loads of stats in the trends. I'm going to go through a few, but if you look back to what we talked about earlier in these, this is from the gov.uk website, in terms of 20% of pupils or learners persistently absent. Why is that? We look at the data, but actually, do we really fact find in regards to the reason behind that? And the ones that jump out for me is actually almost half, 49% of young people between 17 and 23 believes their education has not prepared them for the world of work. I would be really interested in whether that question asked them about work, if that question was asked again, and we'll have to try and find a stat for to call it out if the one exists, of what percentage, if higher, prepares them for the world just in general rather than work. So it's not preparing them for work. If it's not preparing them for the world at all, well, we need to redefine its purpose. Because if it's not actually doing anything apart from keeping them warm during the day so parents can go out to work, it's not lost on me. I'm a parent. And so are you, Ben, and we're heading into the 6-week holidays. Oh my God, let's all scream. But all of those kind of things. But it can't just be that. Like, it can't just be that. Otherwise, we could do that. If it's just childcare, we could do it in very different ways. and do it and think about that. And if it wasn't that measure, then. But I also think that actually it's just bonkers to me. I just think what is education actually doing then? And I'm open for people to say, well, it's doing this and doing this. It's opinion, absolutely. But our young people are telling us voting with their feet and not attending. They're also saying for those people that have left and now in work that we didn't prepare them for that either. So they're not liking it when they're there. They're getting into work and not knowing what they're doing because they haven't learned the skills to get there. I don't think it's preparing them for finance and conversations and critical thinking and all that kind of thing. Fine. What is its purpose? Not what is it, what should it be? What does it actually do now then? Because I just don't think it really... So we definitely need to go back and go into the rainforest thing of we need to emphasise diversity. I think we need to allow people to flourish and celebrate strengths and intelligence in different ways. That ultimately just doing exactly the same thing and expect it and then telling people they're a failure. Well, a failure in what? Based on whose benchmark? Based on what system and what belief? Because I disagree. That Ella is great and doing one thing, but there's also another however many children that are doing wonderful things in primary, which is getting stifled when they get to secondary. But when they get, and if Ella doesn't succeed and get 9 9 9 9s or whatever it is now, will somebody say at her graduation or a GCSE day, if it still exists, Ella's a wonderful individual, she's creative, she thinks outside of the box and she'll do this? Or will she be seen and told at that point she's a failure because maybe she didn't pass an exam? That's my concern for Ella. Not the fact that she's wonderful in her own way, the fact that she'll be judged based on a benchmark for everybody. And that's scary as a parent because literally it's just bonkers because I know how good she is in her own way. And there's so many parents that then go, oh, I've been told that she's fallen behind, he or she's been falling behind in phonics, and they've not done this for SATs. I know, Ben, your daughter's just done stats, and I know there's lots of people out there that are posting, even head teachers, positively in regards to the fact that they don't discuss stats because they don't see the value, and all because we just measure what's pointless. I'm rambling, but
No,
it's
you're
worrying me.
right. But it is a worry, and I hear what you're saying about your 5-year-old who's at the start of the education process, and I've got a daughter who's not far away from coming to the end of it, in its compulsory setting, as well as that makes me sound really old. But you're older than me, so I don't understand how that works. But anyway, we're in that space of we're navigating a world that is. We need to do better at, and an education system that is not set up to help young people thrive, which is where we went with this conversation early on. I think is that we want to help young people thrive. We know that we've got an upcoming interview with Matt Bromley, who we've had on the podcast before, and he's got a book that's talking about why school doesn't work for every child. I think that's the truth of it. It doesn't work for every child, and there are some arguments there about inclusion and belonging, and equity. But if we are to be front thinking in this, if we are to make a difference, if we are to have an education system that lasts beyond, and that young people that have a desire for learning that lasts beyond their education formally, is that we've got to do something a bit different, and we've got to redefine purpose. We've got to rethink purpose. We've got to, and the word purpose isn't something that's just a Simon Sinek book. It's let's start with why, but we've got to ask that conversation and say that we need to move into this idea that an education that has clear purpose will become one that has genuine power, and where children understand that where their learning has meaning beyond testing grades. They'll engage differently if it's not just about how they're going to be measured, but it's something that actually matters, and it's preparing them. And this is just one stage of it. Yes, they're in formal full-time education now, but don't stop learning. This is not. I don't want to burst into a Journey song about don't stop believing, but don't stop learning. Like, we want them to keep learning, and school should be the catalyst for that. but it doesn't always work that way. Probably because we put it around intelligence that is just one simple set of intelligences as opposed to the other elements that sit in there. So we've loads gone on there, isn't there?
And as our guest, Ben, I don't know if you've seen, but we do 3 quick-fire questions. So I'm going to ask you 3 quick-fire questions. But remember, this is our trends booklet. We'll do a download and a click for you to get through. There'll be some information that you put in and to obtain it. And we'll take that data, as we told everybody at the event, mine it and do all the wonders. Of course we will. What it'll do is give you an opportunity to step into, if this is the first time that you're listening, I'll see it. We've got a great community in different ways, and WhatsApp and our mailing list. And if you want to get this into your ears every week at the first listen, if you want to subscribe to the newsletter and everything else, it'll give you the opportunity to do so, and we can add you to that. But don't forget, this is the first, this year's we've had, this is our 3rd iteration. Next year, the future is pick and mix, everybody. Do not forget, the future is pick and mix. We're already on it, me and Ben, and that will be the uprising for next year. It's already in the planning phase, and all of the thing will be around that, because ultimately it's about choice, it's about agency, and some of these themes are just iterated on as we go through. But yeah, we're really interested for you to not just listen to us on the podcast. Go read the trends booklet, have a thought. Tell us what you agree with, what you disagree with. You're welcome if you disagree with someone and you listen and you agree with some. It's absolutely fine. We want positive conversation and conflict. That ultimately we want you to think how this might fit into your school or your life as a parent or your life as a listener and everything else. We'd love you to consider and give some feedback. And yeah, it's been a pleasure, mate. 300th episode.
Yep.
3 trends booklets in. Bet, media partner. We did brilliant as a media partner this year. We've had some ridiculous guests on, and here's to the future, mate. 300. Here's to the next 300.
Next 300. And do you know what? If it would not be right for me not to end a podcast that's episode 300 and say, we are Sparta.
I thought you were going to say, we could talk about this all night.
No, doing a quote from 300 anyway.
Absolutely.
Did he say this is Sparta? But anyway, I've just ruined it.
Yeah,
but anyway,
it's
been wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. We'll just edit that out. You'll never hear this, everybody. Or we'll be lazy and we'll just leave it in. But it's been a wonderful one to discuss it. We talked about having different guests on. Our guests are lined up and ready to come. But it was nice to just discuss between me and you, Ben, our trends booklet that the majority of people have seen at the event. And if you're one of those people who attended our event for the first time, if you're now listening to the podcast for the first time, please go and read the trends booklet for the first time and stay. The water's warm. You are welcome into our community and be 100% part of the Wolf Pack. And we look forward to you listening to more conversations next week and beyond, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
See you soon.
Shaping the next generation.